Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Ray, and welcome to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. In this podcast, we'll keep you up to date with the latest app development tech talk. Now, here are your hosts, Dru Freeman and Nishant Shrivastava.
Thanks, Ray. This is the RayWenderlich.com podcast. Welcome to episode 9 for season 11. This episode was recorded on Friday, the 12th of March, 2021, for release on the 31st of March. This episode is sponsored by me and my shadow walking down the avenue. I'm Dru Freeman with my evaluative and thus procrastinative co-host Nishant Shrivastava.
Thanks, Dru. Joining us in the episode today is Annyce Davis, who is the Director of Engineering at Meetup. She's also a Google developer expert for Kotlin and Android, and has also contributed to the book Living by the Code.
Annyce, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It is great to have you on. We actually had a call out to you 2 episodes ago. So I was like, okay, this is great. We're going to have Annyce on the show in just 2 more episodes. So
nice.
All right. So first question is, of course, how are you doing? Are you sheltering in place? Everything okay and healthy with you and yours?
Yes, we're doing really well. Getting super familiar with the 4 walls of my house.
I love the tree. For those who are going to watch this on the video version, I love your tree in the background.
Thank you. I'm really proud of the fact that I stuck each leaf up there individually in between meetings. So
those are
wow.
So the artwork that Annyce has behind her is a tree that's just beginning to get leaves on it after, I guess, a spring tree. But I had thought that the leaves were painted on separately, but they're actually pasted on. They're papers.
Yeah, they're like little stickies, so you can get an applique. I just ordered it off Amazon and just literally stuck all of those sections on there.
That's wonderful. So you're
All in
familiar
time
with
for
the
the
4
spring.
walls. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nishant.
I was saying all in time for the spring. It's ready. It's kind of like getting full of leaves and everything.
I know,
So-
I love it.
Where are you based out of?
I'm located in Maryland.
Oh, you're not that far. I'm based in Pittsburgh.
Ah, hello, neighbor.
So I take it you've also been dealing with temperatures that are like Powerball machine numbers being pulled out randomly.
Yes, but I'm just excited about it. I think like when I lived in Amsterdam briefly and people used to get really excited when the sun was out, I'd be like, okay, big deal, the sun is out. Now I'm that person. I'm like, the sun is out. This is great. I'm gonna go for a walk after work. Like I've turned into that person.
So you worked for a while in Amsterdam?
I was there for a year and a half.
Oh, so jealous. I
It was cool.
I lived in Nederland when I was in high school for 3 months as an exchange student. And I spent about a day or 2 in Amsterdam. I spent some time in Gorinchem, but I mostly lived on the east end of Nederland in an area near Enschede.
Wow, that's perfect pronunciation too.
Well, that kind of sticks with you when you've been there for 3 months.
Learning.
That's awesome.
That and the fact that we may have some listeners from Nederland, and I would prefer not to insult them with my butchering, as
Totally
I
fair.
often did to Nishant's last name when we started out the season. So
But you've gone better.
I've tried. So let me ask you, when you're not sheltering in place, what is something that you like to do that is not necessarily related to tech?
It's simple, but I really enjoy going for walks. Like I could just walk for like hours. I just love walking. That's something I can still do now. So I try to just like get out and go for a walk. And it just keeps me sane. I don't know. Alone with my thoughts.
Wonderful. I'm waiting for the weather to be normal enough to be able to get outside. I have a bicycle. It's waiting for me. It was my birthday present to me last year, just as things started, and I was like, no, I can't really use the bicycle that much. So
Yeah, I also bought a bicycle, during this pandemic. So I'm looking forward to riding it as well. But in the meantime, I've just been walking. I just go out and I walk.
So for people who don't necessarily know Annyce, can you tell us a little about what you do for the day job?
Yeah, sure. Currently, I work as director of engineering at Meetup. What does that mean? That means I do everything for my day job. Constantly putting out fires, trying to help teams focus on deliverables. I still try to put my hands in some Android code. I can't resist it. So I'll help out, but without affecting the dates or deadlines. So as much as possible, I stay to the side of that. I think my skill set is pretty varied. So I might be helping debug something on TypeScript or reviewing a schema for upcoming GraphQL mutation. Each day, honestly, is very different for me.
So as director of engineering, you're not just working with Android, you're also working with other mobile platforms, you're also working with backend, et cetera.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Was that a big climb to be to grasp onto some of those other technologies?
I'll say not necessarily a big climb, but it's a preference thing. I think sometimes when you really like jelly and then someone only has jam, you're like, oh, I'll just gotta, put jam. Then that's how I feel about like TypeScript. I'm not really a big fan of it, but hey, I have to learn it enough to be able to help the team or to write something or to debug. And that's sort of my perspective on other things. I'm not against Swift, but it's not Kotlin. I love Kotlin, but I'd have to know it enough to be able to say like, okay, hey, look here, folks on line 89, this is the thing that I see happening, XYZ.
Mm-hmm. Now, did you get hired into the company as director of engineering, or did you work your way up from several positions?
When I joined Meetup, I actually started as a senior engineering manager. And then over time, I was promoted into director of engineering. Mm-hmm. And I think what I'll say is kind of growing outside of your one technology area really makes a big difference, and thinking strategically across teams and departments. That's kind of the thing that I feel helped propel me into the current position that I have right now.
So you still get to have a little bit of coding in there, even though it's pretty much everything else now.
Yeah.
But was this like a personal decision that you wanted to move into, like say, into a director of engineering or something, or did it click through something where you decided that, okay, at this moment in time, I'm going to make a decision that I'm going to move towards a certain thing, or a job position?
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't planned from that perspective. I always just want to do my best. And at a certain point, I was behaving as a director of engineering. So then it only logically makes sense that you should just promote me to director of engineering. But that wasn't my initial goal. I'm the kind of person that sees a hole and I'm like, oh, this is a hole. It should be filled. Or, hey, folks, we need some support here. I'm like, hey, pick me. I'll help do it. And I think that that's mostly how my whole career has gone, except for, I'll say, the beginning phases. I think when you're like a junior engineer, you're super eager to get promoted. I definitely was like, I want to be senior. I want to be senior. And then once I became a senior engineer, I almost like didn't care as much. It would just kind of happen when it happened.
So basically, if I'm reading this correctly, a friend of mine used to say the best way to be a duck is to quack like a duck, because once you start acting like a duck, you are a duck. And you found your way to being a duck by way of helium hand.
I mean, that's a great way to put it. That's a great way to put it.
That's your next paper, quacking like a duck by way of helium hand.
Yeah, but if I really think about my day, like, I hope no one from work listens to this podcast. I am good at being a director of engineering, but it's not actually like my favorite thing to be. I personally love programming. When I get some time in my schedule to code, I'm like listening to my music, I'm singing, I'm kind of like in the, in a groove. And there's not that so much when you have 12 meetings in one day.
Yes.
So if I really were to be honest, what brings me joy is like being closer to the code and being able to work on things and seeing that immediate impact of your efforts.
Yeah, I was recently asked on an interview, what is your day like as an architect? And I simply said, meetings. I just stopped there. I said, meetings.
So many meetings. So many meetings.
And I'm going to assume that basically you are, for the most part, remote now, or you have been completely remote.
Yeah, I was already remote before everything. Yeah.
So this being on Zoom is nothing unfamiliar to you.
No, but I feel like there's even more meetings now than before. Like maybe they were secretly meeting in person and not including me. And now that now that we can only meet on Zoom, it's like, oh, meetings. I have this software called Clockwise to like help rearrange my meetings for me and like try to chunk things together. And it gives you a weekly report. So I love looking at it, and it's like, you had 0 hours of focus time this week. You had 24 hours of meetings this week. It's like so depressing.
So the software is called Clockwise?
Clockwise. Yeah. It's useful in that it can rearrange your meetings. So let's say I have 3 one-on-ones with someone in a day, then it will try to optimize to give me focus time. So it might like chunk 2 of the one-on-ones together and move one one-on-one down. And now I have a 1 hour block of focus time. So that's one of my, current hacks that I really love using Clockwise so that it can rearrange my meetings.
Oh, I wish I were at that stage right now. All of my meetings are basically called by other people. So
you got to convince those people to get on Clockwise too.
Also, so the software works when both the people like parties have the Clockwise app. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So the more people you can get in your company on Clockwise, the better all of your schedules will be because it tries to optimize for focus time for everyone.
I think that's the steep climb, like getting everyone onto Clockwise.
Yeah.
But it's a very good as a suggestion. I think I might try it out just for myself.
Yeah, try it out.
Yeah,
try it out for
as
sure.
A developer,
and then,
you want as a developer, you want that focus time, right? And
yes,
when you say that, I'm always like, is that possible? I'm gonna try this out. So that's good to know. But do you have other recommendations, something like this that you use as to manage your life right now as a director of engineering?
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be surprising to some people, but I have a real planner. So for the people watching at home, I have a giant planner every year. And this is what I use to manage my life. Basically, something about writing it down has become super appealing to me the older that I get. And so I like to write it down every week. I have one goal for the week. Then I have some things that I want to try to get done. And I'm like constantly accountable to that, looking back on it. I also really love at the end of the month, I can do a summary of like how I've been just in general. Like, am I in balance financially, socially, with my family, secularly, and reflect on what I accomplished, what I didn't accomplish, and maybe why. So I really love this like planner, writing things down, having goals for every single week. That really helps me to stay productive and focused.
So I would say this season, the one thing we've learned is that paper OS is doing just fine.
Yes.
Between planners and bullet journaling and sketchnoting, we have just seen a lot of people that find getting it written down, which is familiar because my advisor in college always had this has this saying: if it's not written down, it doesn't exist.
Yep. That's how I feel. It just like, or I forget. If I'm in 12 meetings a day, come on, there's no way I'm going to remember every single thing. I have to write stuff down, and I have to like make myself accountable because people are counting on me to follow up with something for them. So I feel like it's just very important to me to plan it out that way and to keep reflecting back like, okay, I have 2 days left in the week. What was my goal this week? Get on it, girl. That kind of thing.
So let's continue on with working remotely. I mean, you've said you've gotten very familiar with the four walls in your house.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that the office is not that far from the bedroom or the kitchen.
Um, Actually, I'm pretty fortunate in that when I was house hunting, so when I came back from Amsterdam, I was doing a lot of house hunting, and having an office was super important to me because I knew that I was going to be working remotely, and it's just something that I see myself doing for a long time. So I did pick a place where I could have my own office space. So it's actually like quite nice. I have a little exercise equipment over here. I have some space, a chair for when I'm sick of sitting in the real chair. And it kind of opens out and looks at a bunch of trees because I love trees. Um, so it's not so confined for me. And I know a lot of people don't have that kind of remote working experience. I also got some legs on it. So when I've had enough of sitting, it can go up and I can
Oh,
stand.
nice.
So it's kind of like I'll probably say this is probably a pretty fancy remote work setup that I have going here. But it's really important to me because when I'm done, I want to just walk out this room and be done. And I don't want to have to feel like work is all around my whole house and I can't escape.
I get about halfway there in that my guest room is my office. So we haven't had guests in the past year. That's made things easy.
Yep.
So I've got the bookshelf, I've got the desk, I've got the window with a nice view. But at the same
It's
time,
important.
I mean, I could refer to it as my thinking bed, but when I sit down on it, I also go unconscious, so that doesn't really help much.
I can imagine. It looks really comfy.
Oh, it is. And the socially distanced tiger.
Yep. Yep. That's important.
Oh, yes,
That's
absolutely.
critical, actually. That's critical to the success of this whole setup.
So how do you, so I appreciate the fact that you said when you're done, you're out of that room.
Yep.
So is it basically you prep yourself, you go into the office and that's how you spend your day?
Yeah. So I come in first things first, a giant thing of water, giant,
Mm-hmm.
a coffee. And I just kind of come in here like, all right, work mode. And we just get going. And then I have like one or two breaks in the middle of the day on my calendar. So it'll say, get up and move. And I see that and I'm like, up. And I just get up. I leave my office. I might walk around, harass my family, eat a snack, whatever it is. And then, okay, boom, back to meetings probably. So I do that. And then when I'm done, I'm done. Like I don't take my laptop out of here so that if there's anything that happens, you have to like text me or message me on Slack or something if on my phone. But I try not to come back in. Like I say, okay.
It's
It's
also
like,
been a theme this
yeah.
season that that you turn off, switch off, clock out. And it's interesting too because from the United States point of view, you get to that point. Most developers are quote exempt, meaning you don't actually punch a clock.
Yep.
But I find that the developers who most successfully stay sane are the ones who actually clock out, so that
Yeah,
they
and
can.
you want to be positive. Like every day I come to work, I don't want to show up to 12 Zoom meetings like, hey, everybody, like every meeting, I'm just like, hey, folks, what are we talking about today? What's this meeting for? Fill me in. What are we going to do? Who's got next? Who's taking notes? Like, I want to be high energy. And I feel like if I was just here suffering all day long, I couldn't bring that sort of positivity and energy
Mhm.
to each day that I show up to work. And it's important to me to be that person because that's the person that I am.
Are your meetings in general camera on or are they just audio?
Camera on.
Hmm. Yeah, my meetings are predominantly camera off, except for me. I like to be camera on. I like to be the one who comes in early and goes, okay, good morning, folks. Good morning, you and you. I keep saying, I'm not the only one who can turn their camera on. You're more than welcome to do so.
I've heard some other companies have a culture of not turning the camera on, but that's definitely not Meetup. Meetup is camera on. And then we're like, hi, Sam. Hi, Patrick. Hi, Tina. Hi. Each
Well,
person.
by nature, I mean, the whole concept of meet up, you're
Yes.
a social company.
We love meetings.
Meetings, yes.
Yes.
Do you use the meetup software to plan the meetups?
That would be so meta if we did.
That would be great.
So you're talking about being positive in meetings.
Yep.
And that really is an infectious way of getting that to the rest of the team. Do you have any other things that you feel lend to a good working community?
Yeah, there are a lot of things. I think just checking in with people informally. I try to check in with people on Slack, or if someone was in a meeting and they seem kind of down, afterwards, I'll also message them just to see if they wanted to talk, or like, hey, you seemed a little down. Is everything okay? I just wanted you to know that I come here for you. Like those sort of things, to just acknowledge that the way my situation is right now, it gets tough for me some days. And I feel like I said, I got a sweet setup here, right? So imagine if you got to work on your ironing board with your kids hanging off your back, screaming on all your Zooms. Like it's probably a really stressful time for you this past year. So I want to let people know that, show that empathy, and just kind of acknowledging maybe your situation is so much better than what they're dealing with, and it's still tough for you some days.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned communication. I also follow you on Twitter and on blog posts and everything. So I know that you're quite vocal about communication within teams, as well as like translating into the dev environment where it's about code reviews, which is also a communication tool. But now the situation has actually changed a little bit. People don't have that liberty of communicating as it was before. So what would you like maybe talk a little bit about how situations have changed? Like, for example, when you started managing the teams, and is there anything that you've actually used or employed at Meetup, say, or even in your past jobs, like say, where you were able to figure out how to solve this communication problem, I guess?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll say one thing I noticed was during this pandemic, and you were hiring people remotely who never actually met each other in person, I feel like it was a little bit of a lack of like trust and camaraderie from some of the new people. And so they might perceive a written tone, like they put a tone into something that was written that probably the writer did not intend. And I noticed that happening a few times, or they would be confused. This note, I'm not sure, does that mean I should change it or I shouldn't change it? Like, what are they asking me to do here? And we started seeing that come up for some of our pull request comments. So one thing I suggested to the team is like, we're going to start adding emoji comments. And so like, if like, you know me at all, I really love emoji. So this like me loving emoji and then plus trying to help the team. So we added emoji comments. If it's a hammer, you put a hammer and then you say, this file should be moved here. Now the person knows this is not like a recommendation. This is something I need to do to approve the PR. If you put the like little nail polish emoji, that means that you're being nitpicky and this is just like a little enhancement. They can or cannot do it, and it's kind of up to them. Or like the question mark, the speech bubble. So we started using all this emoji to kind of convey the tone. Like the emoji kind of added the tone behind what the person was saying. And it made such a huge difference. Like we had sparkles for when somebody did something really great in the code. So you just put like a little sparkle and you're like, thank you for writing unit tests. And it just like changed the whole kind of like tone of that process and made it a lot better. So things like that, where you have to acknowledge that putting something in writing is so very difficult because the tone is not there. And one person could put a completely different tone on something that was totally innocent. And so the power of adding in an emoji is like that conveys the tone. And it's really interesting how we as humans need that extra context that we don't get when we're talking to someone one-on-one, face-to-face.
So you've got communication through Slack for the enthusiasm and the empathy. You've got communication through your PRs, and in general, the written communication as well. It pretty much is a triple threat of getting ways to communicate with your team.
Yep.
These are very good points, because I personally recently got onboarded in a company recently, and then obviously there's like these suggestions, they make so much sense. I'm pretty sure our listeners would actually start using this. Hopefully they see some effect out of this. But it's a very nice one, because I've never actually thought about the tone aspect of the comment, but it's more like you do code reviews, you do code comments, but once you put emojis and you convey your emotions,
Yep.
I think it makes so much sense. It's a very good recommendation. I hope everyone tries this out.
Yeah, I mean, I always try to tell people, picture me with a smile on my face. So I used to have at my old company, one of my reports was like, whenever you type something to me and I feel like, oh no, Annyce is mad, I always picture you saying it with a smile on your face and it makes it better. And I was like, chances are I was probably smiling. Like, so once you kind of like get people to understand that and kind of convey that smile, it helps the team in general. Like, I really love my team right now. They're so great. We get along really well. And that's important to me. That's something that helps me to wake up every day and, sit in this chair for hours, right?
Switching gears a bit, you have a lot to say about the accursed MVP, or minimal viable product, and
Yeah.
your general view is it's never actually an MVP.
Yeah. I mean, I personally have been there so many times. I've seen it so many times. And if it even like halfway works, ship it and start building on it is what companies want to do. A funny story, when we very first, I used to work at Washington Post, and right when Google TVs came out, like some people are probably like, what is a Google TV? But Google TVs came out, this smart TV device back a long time ago. And Google was like, hey, you should partner with us. We're going to ship you a Google TV and you got to build an app for it. And it was like, it's just an MVP. Okay, cool. Let's get this thing going. It's Android. I know Android. Want to build this app. It's probably still in the app store. Like, really, it's never an MVP. It just always goes from there.
On the flip side of that, I'd been working on a piece of software for about 4 years, and I needed to do a proof of concept of something that was going to go into the app. And I wrote another standalone side app, and I looked at it and I was like, okay, it does what it's supposed to do. That's really a shippable product just by itself. I
Ship
put it
it
out there. Yeah, ship it. And it's probably still out there.
That's what companies mostly wait for, when you can say ship it.
Yep. That's the dream.
If it works,
is it done?
If it
Finished?
works,
Why
it goes
not?
on. It's a thing. I think at some point in time also, I was also building something as a proof of concept, and it got shipped eventually, and
Yep.
it's lived over its lifetime that it should. Somehow it survived, which is also great. Maybe the code that we have written was good enough, but as devs, we also always are thinking about, do we like this proof of concept, or do we actually want to build something really nice? That kind of comes back.
So
Exactly.
the general belief is, if you're going to make something that's an MVP, at least build it in such a way that you know that you're going to build on it anyway.
Yes. Yep. That's my philosophy, at least.
So is it a question of better architecture, better development? Is it a slower MVP process?
I think it's a question of having architecture, at least have one, instead of hacking something together, assuming, okay, I'll have a chance to go back and use a real architecture here once we verify that we want to go with this. Having architecture in place is not that time consuming. You can pretty much just pick one these days and at least go with it, something reasonable, obviously, because you might not be around and another engineer could show up and he's like, don't worry about it, that uses MVVM. Okay, cool, got it. So just picking something that's standard, and then assume I'll probably have to build on this again if I stick around.
I had a girlfriend in college who looked at me at one point, and she was an English major, and she says, "Is not all software a kludge at heart anyway?" I looked at her. You are quite wise beyond your years.
It works.
I have to ask, you are a woman in a position of power with a very well-known company. You are also proudly you're a woman of color in a position of power at a major company. Have you had to fight certain discriminations in your position or in your path to get there?
I'll say right now, no. I think that I've done a good job building my brand up to this point where I don't feel that I have to prove myself to anyone. It's probably the opposite where I'm just like, if you don't know, then you don't know at this point.
That's
but
wonderful.
In the beginning, yes, I really did. All the time someone would have to, I would try to get people to even advocate for me. Somebody say like, look, we're going to go into this meeting. I don't know this new team. Can you just please like introduce me and let them know what I've worked on previously so that they can trust my technical recommendation? So I would have to like do that sometimes. Or like if I was, especially when I was working with a new team, like at Washington Post or Lockheed Martin, when you're working with someone new and you come in, there's almost like this, who is she kind of thing. Like, how does she think she can help us here? And so it was, I definitely felt that pressure a lot when I was starting out in my career. And I think that I probably overcompensated by just like being a super, super overachiever, trying to learn every single thing and prove myself to these strangers who, ultimately don't really matter. How did I finally get over it? Don Felker, who I also believe is in the Living by the Code book, he told me one day, he's like, Annyce, look, people fall into 3 buckets. He's like, so always remember this. 1/3 of people love you, 1/3 of people hate you, and 1/3 of people don't care. He's like, so whenever someone comes into your like orbit, your world, your blog post, your whatever, just put them in their bucket and keep it moving. And that really, like, it's so simple, but really powerful that I would just automatically assume like, okay, where's this person fall? Okay, good. They're in the bucket. And then I just move forward. It doesn't require me to keep processing. Well, what did they mean when they said I should have used this? Like, you're in the bucket of people who hate me and I just keep moving. Or you're neutral, nothing to do here. Or you love me. Yay, hugs. Keep moving,
Yeah, I think it was Corey Ladislaw who 2 episodes ago said, she just came out and she said, I'm stubborn. I'm not going to let anybody talk over me. And I just ran with it. It was Corey who was really thrilled to hear you were going to be on the show as well. So
yeah, we worked together briefly. So it's really cool. We're like the kind of Android powerhouse women. So we all know each other.
There's a Twitter group of this. It's called something. I forget the name.
Feminati.
Feminati, yes, the one. And a lot of people follow that because we have all these powerful women there and like people, those who are supporting each other. So that's something that we'll also add it to the show notes. I really want to bring this up. That's super nice.
Thank you.
Yeah. On the flip side, going into the bucket of people who like you, have you wound up how has the effect of being an influence on younger developers been? How is it now to be a role model for other young women coming up?
I'll say at first it was super weird. Like you meet someone at a conference and they're like, hey, Annyce, oh, I love your blog post on this. And then I saw remember when you gave that talk on this one? I was there in the audience. And then, you feel a little weird because you're like, I'm just a regular person, And then over time, I just think, you know what, that's amazing. Being a engineer has opened so many possibilities for me. So even if there's just like in a small way, I can give that to someone else or help someone else get that, then like, yay, I'm excited about it. I never would have been able to travel around the world if I wasn't an engineer and a conference speaker. So if I can share some tips so someone can become a conference speaker so they can travel around the world, yeah, I'm going to do it. Like if I have to spend 15 minutes while I'm drinking my coffee to tell someone have confidence in yourself, I'm going to tell them. So it went from, oh, I'm not a role model, I'm just a person, to okay, how can I help people as much as possible? I think that's why I speak, that's why I blog, because I want to help as many people as I can, that I cannot do it on like a one-on-one basis.
So let's talk about that transition that you made from engineer to speaker.
Yep.
What was the seed that started that tree to grow?
I'll say it started with giving presentations at work. And just like really small ones, not even a full presentation, probably just like a portion of a presentation at work. Like, Annyce, we need you to speak about this one thing that you've done for 2 slides, and just really, really enjoying it. It's fun. It's creative. The way I think, it's like, oh, I get to use my like creative juices, and I'm throwing in some code, and I'm gonna maybe make it pretty because I'm like, girly a little bit. So it's like all these things combining together to present, and also just the fact that I really love learning, and speaking and presenting is the best way to learn something, because you have to own that knowledge before you can share it with someone else. Like, I need to feel confident that I'm gonna stand up here and speak to you about this subject, and there's gonna be some guy to raise his hand and question everything I just talked about for the past 25 to 35 minutes. So I have to own that knowledge to be able to answer him. And that has really helped me to learn so many different topics, just because I know, okay, I'm going to be speaking about ArcJava, then I'm going to own this knowledge. I'm going to be speaking about GraphQL, then I'm going to own this knowledge. And that's been, really, really great just for me, like technically, to go on and progress in my career.
It's funny you mentioned this instance where you mentioned that some guy just raises their hand at the end of the talk. Maybe I would want to know is that from your personal experience, because you've given so many, and also like you've written so much stuff. When such certain situation like that, maybe in the past when that happened when you were at a conference, like a real live one, let's say, now
Yep.
we have virtual ones, but at that time, like how would you handle that situation? Because this is a question that I get from a lot of like listeners also who were mentioning that how do, once we get into public speaking, and then there's this one particular situation where someone asks completely different, or maybe it's not even related to the topic or it's something weird, and then
Yep.
how do you handle that situation?
Yeah, I have a few. I have a few little things I kind of say, depending on what it is that they ask in their tone. So I might say, "Wow, that sounds super personal to you. I'd really love for you to come talk to me after the talk. Thanks." And then like basically like shut them down. They're like, they've been acknowledged, they've been heard, and I'm welcoming them to come talk to me after the talk. Probably they won't, but that's fine. So that's one way to shut it down. Another thing I'll do is say, really interesting question. Anyone else in the audience have any idea? Because if you're coming to my talk on GraphQL, you might know something about it. So you're here in the audience. Maybe the audience members can help you out. Or I'll say, I have never even thought of that. That's nothing I've encountered when I've been looking into this subject. I'm going to make sure I write this down as soon as I get off the stage. And if you want to connect with me on Twitter, I'll make sure I get you an answer. Boom. Like, I don't have to, I try not to be mean, but if they're like totally off base, I might say like, whoa, that's turning into something way more than what we're discussing here today. And then I'll just kind of shut it down. But in general, I try to be like nice about it.
I think
Like your version is like
that's important for any type of talk. That's not just engineering talks. I think that's across the board in any kind of presentation, is knowing how to deal with either constructive questions or what
Yep.
I guess you could term as destructive questions.
Yep. Yeah. Don't be afraid of the questions. It's perfectly fine. And sometimes I learn new things from the questions that people ask. I'll be like, oh, tell me more. Make sure come see me after this because I really want to hear more about that.
I really appreciate the statement, own that knowledge so you can share that knowledge. I think that's really that's a top bullet point in the outline of giving good presentations.
You've been giving these talks for like some time now, but if you had to like give one or two like really condensed point as a recommendation to people who would want to get into public speaking or who are actually doing this,
Yep.
but might learn something from it, what would be those like special nuggets, I think?
Okay. I'll say one is don't talk about something you're not passionate about. That I think maybe that's probably the number one thing I'll say. I've given a talk before when I was over the subject. Like I had a talk on like Gradle plugins or something, and I was super into Gradle plugins for a really long time. And then I was just kind of like over Gradle plugins. Like they're still great, but I don't care about them anymore. And someone was like, hey, can you come give your talk on Gradle plugins? And I wasn't feeling it. I didn't have my energy. I couldn't come up with my good jokes and stuff. Like it just was like, bleh. So that's my number one thing. Be passionate about it. Like people are here to see you, hear from you, learn from you. And maybe someone else they just left was super boring. So now they're coming to your talk and they're like, please give me some energy. So if you're also boring, like it's so unfair. So that's number one, be passionate about it. And then number two is I'll say plan it out. Have an outline. Like have an actual thing you want to talk about. I typically have like rules of threes. So I might have like 3 main points. And within each main point, there's 3 takeaways or something. Like I want to make sure I have an outline enough to feed the audience, at least to get them really excited when they leave here. You know, they're going to click the resources link and learn more about the particular subject. Otherwise, I could just write a blog post. Like I'm not going to speak to something that could be a blog post or a tweet. So make sure there's some substance there. I think is also if I had to just pick 2 things, those would be the 2 things.
How do you separate between where it's a blog post and where it's a talk?
I think about visuals. So first, when I'm thinking about should this be a talk, in my head, I almost start picturing my slides. I'm like, ooh, I could show an animation where the square moves like this, or this would be, I'm going to theme this, and the theme would be this, and that would be perfect in slides because I need to show them piece by piece how we got here. Whereas sometimes in a blog post, I'm just like, here's some chunk of code. Let me explain what lines 5 through 10 do, lines 11 through 12, final picture. Here you go. And it's a reference for someone who wants to like, oh, how do I, whatever it is. Then for a talk, it might be a bit more generic. So let's say I write a blog post, programmatically constraining views with flow. I don't know, whatever. But then if I wrote a talk, it might say the adventures of flow in Android. So I'm starting with like a more high level thing. I'm going to show you various examples of how to do it. I'm going to really kind of break it down for you. And then I'm going to send you on your way with some next steps. So that's how I like to think of, should this be talk, blog posts, or a tweet?
So all of your 3-point and outline is taking me back to my freshman year of undergraduate when I was doing Comp 1 and Speech 1. And this is all coming very naturally for you. Is this something that you were taught, or is this something that you've just acquired through practice?
Yeah, I'll say I definitely acquired it. My parents love language. So growing up, I was always really into like reading and writing. There was that brief turning point in life where I was like, either I'm going to be a writer or a computer programmer, a writer or a computer programmer. And my math and science teacher was like, you need to be a computer programmer. And I was like, all right, I trust her. So that was the path.
One of them pays better.
Definitely.
We are all glad in the Android community. That's good.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that because you also mentioned about like all these talks and like the blog post stuff, but you have also been doing these courses on LinkedIn. Do you like consider them, or do you actually organize them the same way as you would do it for a talk, or is it a bit different organization wise as well as like execution wise?
Yeah, it's a lot more work doing a course, but it's also still very organized for me. I know when I first started doing courses, I actually wrote a couple of blog posts about how to create a course if people were interested, but I do a very similar structure. So I'm like, what is the goal of this course? Okay, now I want to break this down into like 3 to 5 key sections. Okay, now in this particular section, what is the goal? What are the things that I need someone to understand? I want to try to teach at most 1 to 2 things per video. So then that might mean I need this many videos in this section. So it's all very organized. Almost nothing I do is super haphazard, except for maybe just when I'm walking. No, just like, you know what? I'm going to turn left. I'm going to turn right.
That's when you get it out of your system.
Yeah. Everything else is pretty structured.
Exploring the world. So I think that's the best.
Yes.
You commented about how you were devoutly a reader, and I noticed I picked out one of the phrases where you find it easier to grab a book off the shelf.
Yep.
And it's hard with books becoming a dying breed, especially in our industry.
Yeah. It's actually more and more I read books. And sometimes I feel like I'm surrounded by books. So I like have all these, like if you come to my office, there's like all these books, and then like in the middle is a pen. Because I'm like, oh, this is so great. You know what? I want to get that book on. And then I order like another book and I start reading and then stick the pen in. And then I have all these books around me. But I just love getting exposure to lots of different ideas. I love reading about the edges of the software industry. I want to understand the marketing team. I want to understand when someone from marketing tells me X, I kind of want to know like what is that about? And I want to understand a little bit about finance, and I want to understand how to work with contractors. So I have an interest, a very like varied interest. And I also feel that I can learn from other industries. Like one book I'm reading, oh, I actually just finished it, Clockwork. It's about how entrepreneurs can structure their business so that they're not always the star of the show. Like they don't always have to be present and always have to be doing all the things for the business to succeed. And I like, I kind of have a business with my team.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't always want to be the star of the show. I want them to do things without me having to be there to make sure the things get done. I want to go on vacation. I want to, all those things that I want to do. And I'm like, this is perfect. This is like the perfect book for me, because now I'm thinking, how can I structure my teams to run almost autonomously? And I'm just here providing strategy and vision. And they're like the ones actually executing against it. So all of that to say, I love reading because you get exposure to new ideas that you may not initially think are relevant to you, but then they are.
Do you still prefer to stay close to books? Have you tried e-readers at all?
I'll e-read a murder mystery. I'll e-read sometimes some tech books, maybe like there's a new Jetpack compose book that came out actually. And I downloaded that one because I'll go through, and then I'm gonna be on my laptop anyway, so it's perfect. Like I'm gonna be on my laptop. This book is about code. So yeah, I don't mind reading that sort of thing. But in general, I like a good book.
Yeah, I'm predominantly a book person myself. As you can see, I've got my bookshelf, one of my bookshelves right behind me. I've got one over there. But I have to admit, I was e-reading Living by the Code, because as I'm preparing for each of these interviews, I'm reading everybody's interview and I'm highlighting, and I'm discovering the joys of highlighting inside the e-reader so that I
It
can
is
actually,
nice.
it's strange because it feels like I'm marking up a book like I used to do in undergraduate.
Yeah, I mean it's similar, but it's not the same.
It's not. It's
Same.
not
The
the same
feel
as
is
completely
different.
destroying a book, saying this is now mine and this is
Mark,
why it's mine.
Yeah, writing notes like star, star, star. You need to do this. That's so different than like trying to put it in the little chat box on the neat e-reader. So yeah, I'm still team book.
I'm
like the
looking.
idea that you mentioned that you translate existing concepts into the tech domain that you are working in right now, and that's something that maybe I've not heard before. So I mean, this is unique. Maybe I'm learning for the first time. Hopefully, our leaders or our listeners also listen to this and they get some information from this and use this.
Cool.
So you were talking about other people who were in the book. I'm assuming you've read Living by the Code as well.
I've read many of it, much of it. It's a big book.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. Was there anybody in there really who you took something new from?
That's a great question. I can't remember exactly who the person was, but it was something around attitude and just like the importance of having that positive attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I wouldn't say is new, but sometimes seeing it in writing just like reinforces that like I need to be positive. I need to bring that energy, especially as a leader, especially now. People need to feel like some sense of happiness in their work, some sense of joy, alignment with the mission, and it shouldn't be like a drudge, some sort of like ugh, work again. I don't want anyone on my team to wake up Monday morning like ugh, work. I want people to
Another
show
week's
up.
ahead.
Yeah, I want them to show up energized. And so like I work hard to try to do the same myself.
Yeah, so I think I recently Meetup hosted another Meetup live event where they mentioned something about Kotlin multi-platform stuff, and you also gave a talk around Kotlin multi-platform. So maybe you could give us an idea around like what is your views around it, and also like what do you think? What's the future of this? And for our listeners, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm very excited about KMM. I did like a little sample project on my like by myself because I want to see is this real? Like could this actually work for the team? Like I said, I'm not really great in Swift at all. iOS is like, the bottom of the list of what I'm good at. But I was able to put an app out there, write something in Swift UI, do some Googling, get it together. And for me, that was like, okay, I'm sold. I'm sold. I wrote this stuff in Kotlin. I wrote this portion for Android. I wrote this portion for iOS. And boom, both of the apps are running. This is really great. Then I had a conversation with one of our iOS engineers, and I'm just like, throw all your critiques at me. Okay. He's like, well, what about this thing? I was like, nope, that's not true because blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, what is the worst case scenario? Let's say KMM dies a horrible death the way of Google Hangouts or something or G Plus. And what would that mean for us as a company? That would mean we have to rewrite some of the backend of the iOS app in Swift. Swift is so much like Kotlin that it probably would just take one person to do this kind of migration. That is literally the worst case scenario. And he was kind of like, you are right. Yes.
You're convincing developers. I mean, if it works, it works.
Yeah, but really, like that is the worst case scenario. I was like, okay, but what if this happens and then what if them and then blah blah blah. And I'm like, no, I think that's pretty much the worst case scenario if we have to back out of KMM. So where do I see it going? For Meetup, I think a Greenfield app is ideal for it. I'm very much interested in using Swift UI and Jetpack Compose with KMM, backed by Apollo GraphQL. So that is where I'm going to push for us to try this new implementation. We already work pretty closely together. So there isn't this like, I don't know the people on the iOS team. There's not that kind of thing happening right now, which I think is ideal for introducing this new technology into the team, into the company. So I'm pretty excited about trying it out. So probably like the next couple of weeks, I want us to do a hack day where we just do one screen using KMM as a mobile team. And then from there will be like my final recommendation for any greenfield projects to use it.
One particular thing that maybe comes up as a hurdle when you are trying to convince people is that iOS engineers and developers agreeing to write Kotlin code. So is this where you mentioned that Swift and Kotlin is kind of similar? Like you were able to convince them at this point?
It's, well, I'll say they are very similar. And one of our iOS engineers also knows how to develop Android. So he already knows Kotlin. So it's not like a hurdle for him to learn Kotlin and contribute to the backend. We have more Android engineers than we do iOS engineers. So if we were to say, like, take the current team, whether or not we can grow or not, then the back end portions of the app would be written in Kotlin by Android engineers. And then the Android app would be by Android engineers. And the iOS portion would be by the iOS engineers. So that's how I'm thinking it.
Are you talking more the business logic is going to
Right.
be KMM?
The shared
Yes.
code is the Kotlin code,
Yes.
and then there's the iOS version. But that's the tricky part, getting the iOS engineers to agree writing Kotlin shared code, which I guess, as Annyce already answered, she was able to convince and also has a good setup to get it to work.
Well, I mean, inevitably, you're just talking about, even if it's foreign code, it can be viewed as a third-party library.
Yes. Yep.
So as long as you have an API structure to call into it and call out of it, you basically, it shouldn't matter what it's under there.
Yep. I mean, and it's very interesting because when I see the projects coming, just putting on like my director hat, it's literally like the same tickets all the time. Android, implement view model for blah, blah. iOS, implement view model for such and such. Android, write the React repository for blah, blah, blah. iOS, I'm like, oh, every single thing we do twice. So it would be nice if there was a portion of that that's just like, write the repository, write this, write that. And we don't have to do it twice all the time. That would be amazing to me. And that's the promise of KMM. And, I'm really kind of digging that. And I think that would be cool to introduce it into our team.
Moving forward, because you said you have one iOS guy who does Kotlin. Do you feel that programmers should be able to handle both Swift and Kotlin at this point? Or do you feel that specialization is still something that is ecumenical, is a good choice?
I don't know. I guess since no one can throw like tomatoes at this point, I think it is good to learn another platform. Like for me, even knowing some TypeScript is good. Knowing some Ruby, knowing some Python. I think that engineers should specialize in one area, but they should like pull themselves out and become familiar with other areas because like ultimately engineers, what's our goal? Solve business problems with technology. And you put yourself in a box when you decide that you are only an Android engineer or you are only an iOS engineer and I only know how to solve business problems that relate to Android. You could become obsolete. Like there could be a new thing that comes out in 2 seconds. Java 20 could replace Kotlin. I mean, you just never know, right? Like it's just good to be aware of what's happening in your industry and really nail learning how to learn so that you can be, that kind of flexible engineer who solves those business problems.
Yeah, I've never actually, I talk on the show of being the iOS guy, and that's predominantly because with RayWenderlich.com, we focus a lot on mobile. But I've always considered myself an Apple engineer because I've always worked on the platform and it's changed through so many iterations of technology. And it's now become several different devices with different OSs. along the way. But I mean, I admit my watch OS is better than my Kotlin.
And yeah, and I think like it's up to you to kind of decide where you want to see yourself going with your career. But I do think that it's useful to go deep on one area versus like some people, they're kind of, what do they say, like the jack of all trades, the master of none.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good to kind of master something, but have some other tools in your tool belt, you know?
How would you suggest someone start looking at other languages or like say other domains, if they do want to like be master of one, but they also want to be able to contribute in other parts of the code base or the
The,
company?
the best thing I recommend is like start pairing with someone else at your own company. Like chances are you're like, okay, we need a new API to do X. That's another team, maybe, or someone else on your team who's going to work on that API. Why not pair with them to understand it? Download the code yourself. Say, hey, I just want to run this. Can you just show me how I can test this code locally against my Android app or against my iOS app? You learn a lot just from doing that. And pairing with someone who's already like on your team or in your company is a great way to get exposure to different technologies, different frameworks, learn some of their pain points. I used to be jealous of the web people because they had CI/CD. Like, so you just commit that and merge and it's just in production? That's amazing. How do you, that's so, you must be so, so great to have that. And then you realize they have some whole other can of worms. They're dealing with node modules and peer dependencies. And you're like, we use Gradle. This is great. So anyway, just having that kind of exposure to what's happening in your company is a great way to grow as an engineer.
So let's wind things back from growth of an engineer to being a new engineer. I'm assuming as director, you're not necessarily interviewing the juniors or the seniors at this point. You probably have the yay or nay, or even that may be below you at this point. But
Mostly, yeah.
but looking in the juniors, and I know you've written the blog post. What do you look for in a junior when they're trying to crack in their first job?
I look for energy. I'm looking for someone who has energy, enthusiasm, positivity, humility. Being the junior person, you got to be humble because almost everything you get is just critique and feedback on improving. So if you have to look at it from the right perspective, you got to be like humble and hungry. It's kind of a phrase I've heard people say. Like you really want to grow, you want to learn, you want to take initiative, but then you can take the feedback because, you're probably doing it wrong, or at least wrong according to how it's done at that team in that company at that time. So just getting used to taking that critique. I want someone that I feel will take it. And the other thing I always tell people is don't suffer in silence. For me, that is the worst. I cannot take people who suffer in silence. Like they're just miserable or they can't get support from anyone. And then when they're like, I'm leaving, it's like, why? What happened? No one would pair with me. No one would answer my questions. No one approved my PR. No one, blah, blah. You're like, why didn't you tell anyone? So that kind of thing. Don't suffer in silence. So that's something I say if I happen to interview someone. They always like, hey, Annyce, what are you looking for? I don't want people who suffer in silence. You got to speak up. Tell me what you're thinking. I will fix it. And if not, I will like give it 110% to try to fix it. So like that to me and a junior engineer, you kind of have to like be comfortable, especially in a remote setting. No one's tapping you on the shoulder or looking over to make sure everything is okay with you. You have to speak up and let people know what's going on so you can get the help and support that you need.
So I've been having fun flipping this question around this season. Um, in the interview situation, one of the questions that inevitably comes up for somebody who's interviewing is, do you have any questions for me? And this, of course, immediately strikes terror into the hearts of most people who are interviewing because they feel like this is the challenge. The way I want to flip it around is, what kind of questions would you like to hear asked by the interviewee
Yep.
to you?
I want people to ask me about the team. I want people to say, like, tell me, what's the team like? How do they interact with each other? Where do you all communicate the most? Can you tell me about a time where there was a disagreement on the team? How was it handled? Would you do anything differently moving forward? What would my day be like if I joined here? Can you tell me more about that? Oh, okay. So, like, what does the ideal candidate look like to you? Ah, really? That's really interesting. Thanks for telling me that information. I can tell you why I'm the ideal candidate. I mean, like those are some questions that I don't want people to say, I don't know, I think I got everything I need, Ask me questions. Ask me questions because this is what you do the most in your whole life is work. So you got to have some questions. When they say, Annyce, do you have questions for us? I go, yes, I do. so
That's how
if I-
Nishant got the job this season. I asked him
I
a
was
few
gonna answer
questions.
this.
He pulled out his notepad, and I was like, "Okay, you're ready."
I relate to this so much. Even at my new job that I'm in, basically during the interview process, people were like, "Okay, so Nishant, do you have a question?" So I'm like, "Do you have time? Because I have questions." Like you came prepared. I'm like, "Yes,
yes,
I did my research. I did my research. I came prepared for everything."
I applaud you because that is so important. When people don't have questions, I almost feel like, okay, they don't really want to work here.
Mhm.
They don't really want to work. They don't have questions. They don't really want to work here. It's fine.
Red flags.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so I actually read this blog post that you wrote once, which is like crafting a first 90-day plan. And I was super curious. I actually went through all of this, and we'll also put this in the show note. But maybe for our listeners, could you like summarize the gist of that, and also maybe touch upon in the current situation how this will pan out?
Yeah. So I wrote a blog post after my first 90 days joining Meetup. And the reason why I wrote the blog post is because I didn't have anything specific when I first started. And I felt that having that 90-day plan helped me to be ridiculously successful when I first started. And I think that that is kind of set me up for the success that I've had so far at the company. And basically, the blog post just talks about, look, you need to go into a new position, especially coming in as a leader, understanding what is the current situation, what is it that they're hiring you to do. They hired you for a reason. It's very rare that they're just like, we just need another leader on our team. There's something they want you there to do. So make sure you go in understanding that and kind of map out what you want to do. And then the first month, I call it like absorb month. So that's where you're just like trying to absorb and learn as much as you can about the organization, the team, company, etc., and the problems that are there, and really understand what it is they need you to do, and then kind of go from there. So I wrote the blog post as like, I think if I had this blog post when I first started here, I would have been really excited and I wouldn't have had to do as much research as I did. So here's a gift to the future generations kind of thing.
I
Wonderful.
think it helped me. I would say.
Well,
We
you're
got one
welcome.
person who already approved. I'm very thankful for that. And yeah, this is why I also brought this up. I definitely want the listeners to check that out. We'll put that in the show notes.
Okay, thank you.
Annyce, this is amazing material. This is great to hear, and I love both your enthusiasm that you brought to us today, as well as the enthusiasm you bring every day into the workplace.
Thank you.
Did that make any sense at all?
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate that.
We really want to thank you for being on the show this episode. It has been a treat.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed it as well.
Coming up on our next episode, we're going to have Kate Huston. Kate Huston does development and documentation. She has lived in the UK, Australia, Canada, China, Colombia, and the US. And we are really looking forward to speaking with her. Then 2 episodes after the one with Kate Huston, we're going to have me. I am going to we're going to turn the tables, and Nishant is going to basically pick at my brain for a podcast. And it may not necessarily be all soft skills, maybe some hard skills, but If you do have any questions or anything that you'd like me to talk about, please, of course, email us at podcast@raywenderlich.com. We really want to thank Annyce. Annyce can be found on Twitter at BRWNGRLDEV. Boy, that was it's a mouthful until you realize it's Brown Girl Dev.
Yep.
Was there a story behind it, or did you just decide that's going to work?
There probably was a story, but it's Twitter, so I can't remember.
Yeah.
You can find Nis Rules on the internet everywhere. That's Nishant, Nisrulz. I am Podcast Dru on Twitter. You can find us there on occasion. We really appreciate you listening, but as for now, we're going to take things back to the Emerald Castle. Ray, back to you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to the RayWenderlich.com podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a rating on iTunes. See you next time.